We begin in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most beneficent. Thank you for everyone coming. It feels strange how I've got my half back to you guys, but I also want to be posing questions today to the panel. And as we begin, is anyone on the presentation at the moment? Hasib, anyone? Because we need to turn the slides. So we wait for the activated. Just some house rules. Bathrooms are, if you go to the end of this corridor on the right, there are the bathrooms there. Fire exit, just run in any direction you wish. But just out here, I mean, sorry. I believe we have a fire warden here somewhere today amongst us. But anyway, so just as another thing, as you're talking, if you don't mind holding this up too, because this is for the recordings to help the social media. This is for the microphone here. My throat is a bit off today, so my voice is a bit dulled, which I'm sure many of you will be happy about. But hopefully we'll hear more of the panel. Just to get started, if you hit the next slide, we're just going to do a quick icebreaker activity. Is the microphone loud enough? Can you all hear clearly? So if you hit the next slide. So some questions for you. You can shout out the answers, but it's a little bit educational as well. The question is, which type of partnership has proven most successful in improving safety and reducing crime in Muslim majority areas? We won't just quiz the police force, because that's not nice. We're going to ask it to open up to everyone else. But A, is it the multi-agency partnership involving police, social services, and community groups? B, police-only patrols. C, increased funding for surveillance technologies. D, partnerships with corporate businesses. What do you think, guys? A, B, C, or D?
A.
It's like for the exam question, you always go for the one with the most options.
Yeah, that's true. It's a bit of a giveaway. Next, if you hit the next slide, the answer is A. Well done. Next question. What is the name of the hat traditionally worn by UK police officers? Custodian helmet, peaked cap, bowler hat. You've given the answer away, Hamza. Bowler hat or fedora?
Sorry about that.
There you go.
So should you go to the next one?
Yeah, let's go. It's custodian hat, helmet for those who didn't realise. Let's just not press anything down, Hamza, thank you. What is the capacity of Watford FC's home stadium, Vicarage Road? Dave, you're not allowed to answer.
Oh,
30,000, 15,000, 22,000, or 18,000.
C.
A.
These lot know, just too smart, aren't they?
It's neither, actually.
It's C, actually.
It's actually neither, isn't it? Yeah.
The real number is a secret, which only us three know, and that's how it's going to stay. Thank you. So, question: which area of the UK has seen the highest reported number of anti-Muslim hate crimes in the last few years? Glasgow, Birmingham, Manchester, or London? London. I can't hear any answers.
It's got to be London, yeah.
Fine, let's go for it. Yes, it's London. That probably includes us. Which award is given to UK police officers for acts of outstanding bravery or service? Is it the Victoria Cross, the Queen's Police Medal, the Gallantry Award, the Medal of Honour? Yeah. Don't hit the answer.
C.
The Queen's Police Medal. Although that's probably changed now to the King's Police Medal. Who was Watford Football Club's manager when they reached the FA Final Cup in 1984, when I was 1 year old? Is that Graham Taylor, Elton John, Harvey, or Nigel Pearson? All right, fine, you're there. It's Graham Taylor. Right, thank you, that's it. I think you can go back one slide and leave it there. Thank you for your expert services, Hamza. So, I'm breaking my own rules where I'm not holding up the second mic properly. So I'm just going to ask a few questions, and I think what we'll do is we'll start with the police force. And we have today with us Chief Inspector Andy Wiseman on the end there. We can do a little intro in a moment, formally by each person. We also have Sergeant Edna Arsalan over here. I know, but I wanted you to say that because that's what I wanted to say. There you go. And you don't correct it. And then Sergeant Andrew Thomas and Dr. Saika, who is a trustee of Watford Muslim Youth Centre. And we obviously have our beloved Dave, who represents Watford Football Club as the EDI lead, and myself as well, who's a nobody, you don't need to know. So that's fine. So I think, do you want to just say a quick hi, and then we can go on to some questions? And maybe just hold that as well.
Yeah, good evening everybody. Thank you for coming to visit us today at Watford Football Club. I'll talk some more later on about some of the work that we do, but it's our absolute pleasure to host these events for the Watford Muslim Youth Centre Trust. How many are we on now? This is probably our 6th or 7th event, I think, at the stadium. So it's a great pleasure for us to be involved, and we're delighted to see you all here today, and hope you have a useful and productive evening.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and hello to everyone. My name is Saika Zad. I'm a local GP and also a trustee at the Watford Muslim Youth Centre. I've been placed on the hot seat, so let's hope Brother Imran is nice with some good questions. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum everybody. So my name is Andrew Thomas. I am the Positive Action Sergeant at Hertfordshire Constabulary. So that's my professional side of things, and we'll probably go into a bit more of that later on. Personally, I am a father of 3 from London. Don't hold that against me. And I myself reverted to Islam in September last year.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Adana. I'm not a sergeant, as I've already mentioned, but I'm a frontline police officer, and I have been for about a year now. And I'm very grateful to be here.
Thank you. Salam alaikum. I'm Chief Inspector Andy Wiseman. I was born and raised in Watford. I can't afford to live in Watford anymore, but it's still very dear to me. And I have been the Chief Inspector of this fabulous town for 2 years.
If you keep that, actually, keep the mic. I'll ask you a question.
He said keep it.
I'll stick with you. The question for you I have is, what challenges do officers face when policing diverse communities? So what challenges do you think you face?
I think it's a multifaceted answer, really. I think there are lots of challenges to policing in general, but I would just turn that question around for a moment and say that I think that's actually one of the appeals of policing, is the opportunity to work with so many different people and so many different communities. I don't really see it as a challenge. I'm incredibly proud to work in the smallest geographical area of Hertfordshire, the most densely populated part of Hertfordshire, and the most diverse part of Hertfordshire. As I say, I grew up in Watford. I thought nothing of being at primary school and secondary school with Muslims, with Jews, with Hindus. I had a very diverse upbringing, and that's why I think it just seems so simple to me that we should be able to work, live and play alongside each other. I think sadly other people in society haven't had those same experiences and possibly don't see diversity in the same way. But I think the challenge for police officers coming in is the fact that we have to be honest about it. There has been in recent years a trust and confidence issue with policing nationally. 2 individuals come to mind, 2 police officers in the Met, who have done untold damage to the reputation of policing. And unfortunately, we all pay the price a little bit for that when some members of the public no longer trust us quite so readily as they used to. And I think, the fact that some people simply don't know how to contact the police can sometimes be a barrier to our work with people, and I don't really like the phrase hard to reach communities. I think that's us implying that the problem is with them when we use that phrase, hard to reach. I think it's underserved is probably the reality of it. So, you know, we do have an awful lot to do on a day-to-day basis. We have a finite number of police officers, and we are dealing with a whole range of demands. And I think we would all like to do much more of this public engagement, and that's really why, for me, it's so invaluable that we're here tonight. But I think we are, as a constabulary, we are incredibly willing to engage with communities. You know, we do a hell of a lot in Hertfordshire that is the envy of other forces I know up and down the country. And the more we can do, the more, hopefully, we will dispel that perception that there are difficulties.
Thank you so much. Sergeant?
Really not.
I don't even like it, this is like...
Yeah, I think I'm loud enough.
How does the police force work to build trust within the community in Watford?
I mean, I don't know if I mentioned, I work in the east of Hertfordshire, so I'm nowhere near here. But I think, personally, what I've seen and heard from others is that when we're, especially from time I've seen, when we're actually, if our police force looks like the communities that we're actually serving, that holds a massive benefit. And I think that's what they're really trying to do, to try and recruit from minority ethnic backgrounds, so that we have officers that look like the communities. And I've seen firsthand what that can do to people. Like I said, I'm not here, but obviously the whole of Hertfordshire as a whole, I've worked in different areas where we've been covering and stuff. People's reactions mean a lot, and I think without even saying it, you can tell from their faces when they have different officers, whether that's an officer from an Asian background, or you've got, like myself, wearing a hijab, or anything really. If it's where people think that they can see themselves in a force where they wouldn't normally, it just goes a long way. But if anyone else wants to answer on behalf of Watford, I'll give you the mic, but I'm not from this area, unfortunately.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm Jim.
That will never happen. So I'm quite lucky that I get to see what every CSP is doing in Hertfordshire in terms of their community engagement. And what I would say is that Mr. Wiseman here spoke about Hertfordshire doing a lot and being trailblazers in terms of other police forces, and very different to other police forces. In the same sense, Watford is actually not very different from other CSPs or boroughs, but they are standing out in the stuff that they are doing. So these sorts of events, Watford SNT have a very good relationship, obviously, with you guys here, but also with the different masjids across Watford. They have good inroads with One Vision, of course, as well, who has a lot of minority ethnic people. But specifically in terms of our Watford Muslim community, I think this is the most important thing, is that Watford S&T, Mr. Wiseman and the team here are willing to come here and put themselves in a position where they're being asked questions, which could potentially be difficult questions. So things like this, I think, is the real simple answer to this, to that question.
There is one more specific example, if I may. Sorry. I do promise not to hog this all night. But, when I came to Watford last year, actually 2 years ago now, of course, it occurred to me that we have a lot of particularly young officers working in Watford who only come to Watford for the first time when they start day one as a police officer, and don't really have much understanding, with no fault of their own, of the town and its heritage, its history, and where it's come from. So one of the things I did when I started was I created days where we would actually go out into the community in plain clothes on training days and actually meet people, key stakeholders in the community. And one of the venues we went to was the Central Mosque on Cambridge Road. The Imam, Mr. Salim, was incredibly hospitable, and over the course of 5 weeks we took near enough every police officer and PCSO and police staff from Watford Police Station through the front door of a mosque. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of officers hadn't actually been to a mosque before. They had various understandings of the faith, and to have that experience, I think, really did improve the relationship I hope that we have with the Muslim community in Watford, educate police officers, and hopefully show that we are very willing to engage in similar ways in the future.
See, that's so amazing. At the same time, most of us here didn't know that because it's not been advertised by the mosque. They haven't really actually been able to showcase that sort of interaction, which would have been really uplifting for the wider community to see. So whilst people who were in the mosque would have seen that, I think the rest of us probably, I mean, I'm not sure how many people in the audience knew that, and that's such an amazing thing to hear. So thank you for sharing it. While this goes out on our socials, we'll really bring that out into the public. So that's really good. Thank you. Right, let's grill up Dr. Saito. Right, so what are some of the biggest challenges facing young Muslims in Watford today?
That's assuming I'm very young, part of the youth as well. So I'm a mum of 3. My eldest, he's almost 15. So I've also grown up in Watford. So I think I've had an experience, quite good experience. I think what I think I'm maybe talking as a mother more, and I think what the youth struggle with most is a sense of dual identity. So they find it difficult as a Pakistani or Bengali, so they bring in their culture, and as a Muslim trying to fit into a British society. And I think this identity struggle, pushes them to maybe what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe pushes them towards confusion, isolation. They're struggling to fit in with their peers, trying to merge into the dominant culture. And by doing this, they may actually struggle to show their identity. So, for example, girls may start wearing hijabs from the age of 9 or when they start in secondary school, but they might get picked on by their peers and may not do so. Or maybe going for prayer, for Friday's prayers. Some children might struggle to do that because actually now my mates are playing basketball and I don't want to be the only one going praying, or I don't want to miss it, or you get picked on for praying, you pray to God, who prays to God, those kind of, I've heard of these remarks. And within Watford, we're actually very lucky. We've got a diverse community and a good Muslim community. But there is still variation between schools. So, there might be some schools, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention names of schools. But
Probably not.
no, in a positive way, not in a negative way. Yeah. So, for example, Watford boys have a good community, they have a good network. They lead, they have someone leading, I see some nods over there, but they have someone leading Friday prayers, and there might be other schools where actually it's probably not the school, but it's there's a lack of community, there's less of them, and therefore they don't mingle as much, you would say. So, and I truly believe that still, even when I was growing up, we were trying to fit in with a British society, but still trying to hold on to our cultural ties, our religious beliefs. And I think this struggle continues.
Okay. On that note, I'm also going to say, Brother Abid here, who was actually instrumental when I was a little kid at Watford Boys Girls School to help us set up, find a room to pray in, make sure we had an ablution area, so we used to lead some of the prayers back then, so thank you for that.
It wasn't just me.
Yeah, well, you were part of that group, so thank you. Just a memory.
And I think that's probably, sorry, I'm going to hog the mic now for a little bit longer, but I think that's probably one of the struggles, and I think most of us would agree that the second struggle is now, gangs and crimes, and, either they are the ones performing the crime or actually, having to face the crimes. It was last weekend when I was working and I had 2 cases back to back of where I had come across an armed, patients who had experienced armed robberies. Armed, you would say, okay, but they were put at knife point. So one patient was actually the child, the teenager, who was robbed at knife point in Kings Langley. And this was 6 months ago, and he's still struggling to leave his house with anxiety. And the second was actually very close to home in Casbury Park, where a young teenager was walking back from home and was attacked by 3 or 4 other men, and mobile stolen, had some card or cash, everything was taken. And he was actually okay, but the mother is affected. The mother came to me saying that she's struggling to sleep, struggling to let him go out. So I think this as well is probably one of the other biggest issues, not just within the Muslim youth, but general youth.
Yeah. We'll touch on that a little bit more. Dave, let's go into the
Get that back.
That's all right, I think that's how it works. How does Watford Football Club engage with the local Muslim community? What's your experience?
That's a good question. For me, I think I've been in this particular role now as the club's quality person inclusion lead for my 3rd season in this role, and I was fortunate to take it over from something that had already built good relationships with lots of the communities around Watford. But I think for myself, as I come into this role, I'm not going to say it, but I'm a middle-aged white Englishman, and my knowledge of the Muslim faith and the Muslim community in Watford probably wasn't as great as it could have been growing up as a child, as a teenager, all those sorts of things. I think for me the biggest thing that I've learned in the last couple of years from being around the community and being at events and I think for me that understanding, that learning that I've had in the last couple of years has stood me in really good stead, and it's helped me to be able to develop the role in the way that I'd want to. So I think for me, working with the local Muslim community is one of my favourite things of my role. I'm not just saying that because you're all here, but it genuinely is. We've done things, we've had scout groups in for tours, we've had our events that we've been holding here at the stadium, we've had iftar events, and I remember, I'm sure remember myself and a few colleagues fasting for 3 days during Ramadan, and I know that everybody fasts for a month during Ramadan. We did 3 days, but I think it just shows that what we want to try to achieve at our football club, we want our football club to be a part of the Muslim community. And I think a lot of football clubs up and down the country have kind of got equality, diversity, inclusion wrong, because what they're trying to say is we want more people from different backgrounds, Muslim communities, to come to our matches. Yeah, great, we'd love that too. But for us, it's about making sure that the football club is a part of the local Muslim community and understands what the local Muslim community is going through. Some of the things that you've already sort of mentioned and talked about in your answers already. For us to understand that and for us to learn from it and for us to play our part in helping our town be as inclusive as we want it to be, as well as our football club being as inclusive as we want it to be. So I think for me, that's the real bonus and the real joy of my role is working with the Muslim community and all the other communities in Watford as well.
Yeah, and it's been a real pleasure working with the club as well. I think I've attended a few football matches now because of Dave's encouragement, and I never would have done that.
Can I share the story really quickly? That the first conversation I ever had with Brother Imran, I won't ever come to a football match, Dave. Don't ask me to come to a football match. It's not my thing. And we had a match. Those of you that are familiar with the last couple of years at Watford will know that we celebrated 100 years in this stadium 2 years ago. And we had a bit of a sort of celebration match day on the closest match day. We got really lucky, the fixture list was kind. And we had a match on the actual anniversary of the first game 100 years ago, home to Middlesbrough. So we invited lots and lots of local community partners to come and enjoy the game with us. And I managed to talk Imran into coming to the match. And the game is 1-1, delicately poised football match for those football fans, 70 odd minutes gone. And Imran decides that this is the moment that he's going to go and use our prayer facility at the football stadium, because we have a multi-faith and reflection room which is used on match days, so that people from different communities that wish to pray during the match can do so. So Imran and the other guests went to pray and came back, and 10 minutes later Watford scored a late winner. And he claimed it, of course he claimed it for the community, but It was such a fantastic moment, and again, for me, kind of a great example and something I love recalling to counterparts and colleagues at other clubs about the power of football, what football can do, how football can achieve, and make that sort of bridge, if you like. And that's a favourite memory of mine. I hope you don't mind me sharing it, because it still makes me smile, not just because we won the game.
My contribution is Watford. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Right, let's go back down to question is, are there any specific initiatives or policies in place to combat Islamophobia and ensure fair treatment?
I would say, is that working still? Yeah. I would rather probably talk about hate crime as a whole, because for me, there probably aren't specific initiatives in relation to Islamophobia quite so much as there are specific initiatives in relation to hate crime as a whole. Now, hate crime, sadly, is on the rise. I think it's probably fair to say. Certainly in terms of the figures, we recorded 197 hate crimes in Watford, we have since the 1st of April. And that is sadly an increase compared to last year. And that is a combination of racial offences and religiously aggravated offences. And although I don't have a specific breakdown of individual religions for you this evening, I'm in no doubt there will definitely be Islamophobic offences in there, sadly. The first thing to say is that it is something that the police service does take incredibly seriously, because we fully understand, and we've had some appalling high-level cases which demonstrate the harm that hate crime does to people. And one of the things that we do have specifically in place now is actually a hate crime officer in every area, and we have a hate crime officer based at Watford Police Station who sadly couldn't be with us this evening. And that officer is considered to be a local expert really in resolving hate crime. They will deal with hate crime offences. We hold a number of events where we are out in the community to raise awareness of hate crime. We have conferences with partners and other agencies to raise awareness of that. And hate crime now features in even our schools engagement work, where we do work with even primary school children now, mini police. And do you cover hate crime on the mini police scheme? Yeah. Yeah. So even at primary school age, we are raising awareness of it now, and making it very clear that we won't stand for it, and society shouldn't stand for it. And that goes right up to work we do with other community groups as well.
Gosh, it's quite surprising to hear primary school level that hate crimes can happen. That's, I suppose I'm living in a bubble, but that's quite saddening to hear, really. You think children would be a little bit more innocent to all of this, but that's quite surprising.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, I'm not necessarily suggesting it's prevalent in primary schools, but certainly the awareness of it, I think it's important that we start at primary school age so that it's clear to young people that it should not be tolerated. You shouldn't just put up with it if you encounter it. And also to call it out when you see others doing it. And that's really important throughout all the generations.
Can I just add on to that? Okay. So the constabulary, in terms of Islamophobia, and it will start to filter down, and it's just about to be released. But we have what's called third-party reporting centres. So it's been looked at, and hate crimes are not being reported a lot of the times. And sometimes that's because of a lack of trust, perhaps, in the police. Sometimes it could be language issues. Sometimes it could be it's too difficult for someone to go in and to report that to the police. So the constabulary is doing more around third-party reporting. So what that means to people in this room is that if there are people in this room, perhaps like yourself, who have communities around them, who have a large network around them, and you're trusted within the community, could be an imam, for example, whoever it is, a member of the public could come to them to actually report the hate crime to them. So they'll be trained on how to take that report, and then they can report it directly to us, and then there can be that link between the police and the victim. So I think that will do a lot of good when it comes to actually getting more of this reported and looked at, and trying to rebuild some of that trust. And that will be getting filtered down very shortly to the different CSPs, such as Watford. So if there are people in the room who think, actually, I'd be really happy to learn how to take that crime report and be that person in between, I think that will be a huge help. I think that'd be a really good thing to do.
Well, that's interesting, because it kind of reminds me of failure of prevent, which was a sort of colonial kind of outlook, when we will fix you, as opposed to letting the community be empowered to deal with their own issues. So this sounds like a more intelligent approach if you are going to make a change like that. So that's good to hear. So whilst we're still in this, what other major issues do you find when you're on the streets and you're dealing with people and you're seeing people, especially with Muslim youth? What trends are you finding? What problems are you seeing?
I think I've already spoken about it, and as someone who grew up, I spent a little bit of time in Watford actually, going to St Michael's, but actually the majority of my time I grew up in London. Came from a mixed race background. I was always taught as a child to distrust the police, don't trust the police, and that's we have to accept it's because of the failings of the police historically, the generational trauma that's been passed down because of that, and the things that have gone wrong. So I suppose the first problem or challenge is going to be people not trusting the police, and that is a massive problem. If you don't trust the people that are there to help you, then who do you turn to? You don't then turn to the police, do you? You turn to other people, and that's when I think things can go wrong. So rebuilding that trust is massive. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It has to be something that is a continuous change. And for me, I think one of the only ways, there's lots of stuff that happens in the background, but one of the biggest and easiest ways to do that is we have to have more people from our own backgrounds in the police. So that trust, getting that trust back, and then that comes on both parts. So we need our young Muslims to trust the police, and then we need our police officers to have enough education around Islam or whatever the lack of, so Islam itself or the race side of things in terms of the black or Asian community. So, the education around both of those, and then why is there generational trauma? So why is it, if you're as a police officer, why is it that someone does not trust you, as opposed to just seeing someone who might be perhaps not happy to see you, if that makes sense? So both ways.
Yeah, it's interesting because generally speaking, I think Watford's a good town. You can walk outside and you don't really feel in particular, but most Muslims or people of colour will experience microaggressions, subtle racism, which isn't obvious to pin down. And we can identify that instantly, but we just think, well, it's just life, right? Just get on with it, and we just get on with it. But is that really the right thing to do? Probably not. And I think again with the police force, that I'm sure there's lots of. The whole reason we're doing this as well is to try to dispel the distance between community and police. But there can be a case where you feel like, oh, my problem is not going to be resolved. So what's the point? So that can exist in the mentality, oh, well, they're not going to help us anyway because X, Y, and Z. So it's important, I think, that engagement is positive, so that feeling of being welcomed and to be listened to and the problem will be addressed comes into play.
Yeah, and I think that's also where people like yourself come into play, and the other people within this room, because if someone's issue has not been dealt with properly, then they should come into the police at maybe perhaps at a higher level to be looked into, or perhaps you can come in to say, right, why has this not been dealt with? So this is why this community engagement is so important. Often there is a perception that something's not going to be get dealt with properly. It doesn't mean that it's true, of course, but there are going to be failings. There will always be failings. We just need to make sure that we keep on top of those and we learn from each one. I can't sit here and say that the police is perfect in any way, shape or form. What I can say is that the vast majority of police officers are there to do a good job. They want to do it for the right reasons. We just need to make sure that those that aren't are being identified, and we can't identify those, if there are any, without people coming into us again and saying this person hasn't done this properly, for example. So I just think, yeah, it's massive between the two sides.
It's interesting because people who feel like they can connect or have that influence can be confident with it, but the layman doesn't necessarily have that, and that kind of sense of trampling can happen. But hopefully that will change in time. Quickly as well. It's not, I'm not talking about for general.
Yeah, in general. Yeah, absolutely.
This is a wild observation. So, it's like, should we come to you and then we'll come back to you.
Please do.
The wrong section. There we go. What more can be done to support Muslim women and girls in community engagement and leadership?
That's a good question. I guess a lot can be done. I think first, going back to the basics where, there's a false belief to say Islam is a misogynistic religion. And we all know, whoever's read history, that actually women played a vital part in the development of the Islamic State, of Islam, at the time of our Prophet, peace be upon him. So I think this belief comes not from religion, but potentially, this is what I feel, is more cultural. So whether you're Pakistani, Bengali, Arab, so I think it comes back to culture rather than religion. So let's try and answer your question. What can be done? The first thing is education, educating women. So there's some women in the community who actually don't have a basic education. So no English, no computer skills, no interaction skills, no communication skills. So, and I know Watford, and you said Watford's a great town. It is a great town. We have lots of opportunities. We've got a great women's centre, and they provide so many courses for women. But I think a lot of women might not be aware of them. And I guess it's raising awareness. And we have the Multicultural Community Centre on Durban Road actually does quite a few ladies' classes, exercise classes, and even within our centre, we've done women health awareness classes and, an educational point. So I think education is key. And then how to encourage, how can our religious leaders, our community leaders integrate women? Well, I think first it's important for them to recognise their traditional roles. So recognise the housewife. It's not easy being a housewife. And women, then, some people choose to be a housewife. I have a colleague, she's a doctor, she chooses to be 60% housewife and do 40% of the work. And she chooses to do that. So I think recognising traditional roles is important. And then giving, it's all well and good saying, we want women to be involved, come and join us, come and be a bit more involved, but where are the opportunities? What opportunities are we providing them? What are the initiatives? I remember after we had an event, I can't remember, last year, I think it was the iftar event, and I did say, it would be good for women to get more involved. And then when I left that event, and I thought, involved with what? What am I saying? There's not enough initiatives, I think. So I think the initiatives need to come either from the centres, from ourselves, and particularly from the mosques. And then involving women, okay, fine, you can give them a project to do. So if there's an event, normally women are given the admin roles to do. They're given, you do the food preparation. But involving women in key decision-making roles. So putting women on the committee boards, on the trustee boards. It is beginning to happen, hence why I am here.
Thank you very much. Dave. are there any programs for Muslim youth to get involved in sports?
So, in terms of programs, our Community Sports and Education Trust, so it's they're our charitable arm, if you like, so they're part of the club, formed about 25, 30 years ago, and they run a huge amount of programs across Watford and Harrow and other areas in South West Herts. And those programs, we're working really hard, again, with the trust, has my counterpart that works within the trust, who is targeted and asked to make those programs as inclusive as they can be, and to encourage more people from different backgrounds to come to those programs. So we have a number of things. I should have brought some leaflets with me actually to hand out to everybody. That would have been useful, but very, very happy to share all of those details so that they can go into the wider community. But just to give you a couple of examples, there's a Shape Up programme, which is around weight loss and fitness. I'm happy to share that I've signed up for that myself. I've signed up for it myself. I had my first session last night. But so Shape Up is a great session for weight loss, for fitness. A couple of other sessions for kids for playing football. There is a programme called PL Kicks, Premier League Kicks, which is run by the Premier League, but actually every single club, whether they're Premier League or EFL or wherever they are all able to participate in Premier League Kicks as well. So that's another of the programmes that the Trust runs, which is all about trying to get as many children as possible outside into the fresh air, playing football in leisure centres, or astroturfs and things like that. And one other example that I think I can share, or I can share them all obviously, but another good example is the Youth Link project, which is another great project that the Trust run, which is helping those children or youngsters, mainly teenagers, that are experiencing anxiety or experiencing challenges within their own personal lives. Youth Link is a brilliant service where there's one-to-one support, not necessarily counselling as such, but more one-to-one support. Come and share your fears and concerns and anxieties, and our staff will help to try to alleviate those as best they can. So that's just a handful of the projects. There's around about 20 in total that the Trust runs. And again, the Trust, those programmes are available to absolutely everybody, and we've absolutely welcomed people from the Muslim community to come and get involved in those, and very happy to share those. So you can see that if you go onto the Community Trust website, for example, you'll be able to see all of the programmes that are run.
So it's interesting because a lot of the time when you get a ghettoisation or a lack of privilege in certain communities, they don't get to access sports in the same way as other communities might. So sports is a really effective way of getting kids off the street effectively and away from bad habits. So I think, whilst you mentioned this, we should really advertise more these sort of availabilities of sports.
And I think I can quite happily offer this as well to the Watford Muslim Youth Centre Trust, if there's a way that perhaps we can pull together some bespoke programme just for people that are part of the Trust to come and be involved. We're very happy to have those conversations as well. It's something we can talk about and look at, about coming up with some sort of programme where we open up our facilities for people to come and use. So we're open to that. We've got up at our training ground at London Colney, we've got a indoor dome, which we've hosted football tournaments and different events in there before. So that dome is available if we wanted to do a football coaching session for Muslim youth. Very happy to do those things as well and organise those as bespoke things, as well as being part of our standard programmes. So.
And we have held several tournaments for Ramadan or Eid tournaments as well, which have worked really well. So, except for a few scuffles, but otherwise it's worked really well.
Yeah.
So that's been really good. Thank you.
Can I add in a point?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just about sports and youth. My son plays cricket, and a special mention here to Brother Gulfraz here from West Herts Cricket Club. And I think it's been a real life saviour actually, because he became passionate about cricket. He wanted to eat, sleep, drink cricket, and and maybe that's why I hope he's not, but he's on a good path. He's focused. It teaches them discipline. And they get mentored within whatever sport you do, whether it's football, whether you do cricket, they get mentored. they are looking up to role models and good role models. So I think sports is definitely a key here, and in Watford we're very lucky to have good clubs around us. Sorry.
Let's take it right back to the end there. That's okay. The question I have for you is, what role can the police play in preventing radicalisation while protecting civil liberties?
Yeah, okay, interesting. So I suppose really what I'm going to lean on here is my experience and qualifications as a public order commander. So I have had additional training in how to manage public order demonstrations right up to disorder. And that is something that we are constantly having to redefine and tread down an increasingly narrow line between free speech and criminality. And I think that line, goodness me, it's taking quite a battering. I think globally now those lines are being redefined, aren't they? And whereas I think in the past the police would have been criticised for not acting sooner at the mere suggestion of something that was seen as inappropriate or provocative. I think now in a more tolerant society, but also a more educated and creative society, I think those lines around free speech are certainly being redrawn. And actually legislation is changing. Public Order Act has changed in terms of what you can and can't say and those lines where they are now. But it's important to remember that there is a line. There is a line where free speech does cross over into criminality and hate and extremism. And I think it's important that we enforce that. I think it's important that we encourage, again, this all comes back to the fact that we cannot do this alone, and we do need the public to be the eyes and ears in our communities. And if there isn't the trust and confidence in us to do something about it when things are wrong, then, you know, who's going to deal with it if we don't? So ultimately, you know, it's communities that fight extremism, and it's only by having that trust and confidence and these relationships that we can together tackle radicalisation and extremism. So it's important that we do have that dialogue, that understanding, and those that trust and confidence.
This is true. I think with radicalisation, extremism, it does stem from a lack of education mainly, and also unfortunate circumstances in their own lives which are projected onto all sorts of false promises of salvation, which can exacerbate that problem. But separately, in terms of free speech, now that it's mentioned, I think Global Civility, it's a campaign which I've signed up to, and I think it's phenomenal to sign up to. Global Civility basically talks about civilized societies are measured by their basic levels of respect. So if we have a reckless use of expression which vilifies and denigrates communities and people, then that is not a civilized situation. That is not a civilized people. So that freedom of speech has to be measured within the context of global civility.
Yes.
And I think that's quite key. And I don't know if you should go online to globalcivility.com. If you haven't signed up, read the sort of declaration. It's just a sign up, just to educate people. And what that does is it allows people to uplift their compass so that they can learn to respect and be civilized. Because without that, I think society falls apart.
Yeah.
And so, we're seeing, and the more we, as time is passing by, we're seeing more things happening around the world now. So it's interesting to see this. But yeah. Can I ask from both your perspectives as well. Have you had any issues with sort of extremist thinking, or not necessarily religious, but it could be just hateful thinking or racism?
So is your question about any hate that we've received? Sorry, just so I don't misunderstand.
You received, or you see other people projecting them towards others?
To be honest, I think we've all seen our fair share of it, regardless of if you're religious or like visually you're from a different background. It's obvious. As an officer, to be honest, I've been quite lucky to only receive it twice, and it was literally a weekend. It was one day after another. I've not had anything since, but I think it all comes down to lack of education. Don't want to be stereotypical, but they're all the same group of people it comes from. But actually the things they're saying, all the comments they're saying are because they don't understand. I get like micro comments, like a bit dismissive of what it is, like why have I got it on my head, stuff like that. But actually I don't take that as offensive, because they could be meaning it to be offensive, but I'm not going to take it that way, because even if I can help that one person, even if they're meaning to be horrible, it doesn't really bother me. At least I've told them why I'm wearing it or what it is, and then they might, I don't know, but they might think about it next time. But to be honest, most of the time where I've had engagements with people in our community, like I said, I work in East Herts, which is basically Bishop Stortford and Hertford areas. There's not a lot of diversity, so I think they have more questions to ask. But it does come from a place of, what actually is that on your head? Like, why are you wearing it? So I do like having that conversation with people, and they are quite respectful. And I think a lot of my team were a bit nervous when I first landed. They thought I was going to get a lot more hate. But actually I've had a lot of quite nice positive conversations that come from it, and they're just curious to find out. But yeah, I've not had anything too bad. Fingers crossed it'll just continue that way. I try to be, because I feel like I always say to people, even before I was an officer, having an opportunity to ask people questions is something we don't have a lot. I personally would love to sit down with someone of a different faith and ask all the questions that we want to ask. You can ask Google as much as you want, but having a person who's had that lived experience, who has that like local knowledge in a sense, is always going to be so different. So I think if people have the opportunity with me, I always say no question is like too offensive or like they think it's stupid. It's not. You're just asking that question genuinely because you'd like to know the answer, and I'm always someone that would be happy to have that conversation, because if I deny that opportunity, then they're not going to get that from elsewhere, or they then won't ask someone else in the future if I've denied that. Right, I'll shut up now.
From my point of view, I mean, I haven't been a Muslim long enough to experience any Islamophobia. In terms of racism, I've been in a police officer now for 9 years maybe, and yeah, I've experienced a lot of that, a lot. So when I first started, my job now is a mixture. I still go out and I patrol, and I do a lot of tutoring and mentoring. But when I first started, obviously, I was always out on patrol, so that's your job. So I would face a lot of racial abuse, based obviously around the colour of my skin. I always struggle to wonder, are these people giving this abuse racist, or are they saying it because they just want a reaction out of you? That was something that was really, really interesting, because someone would say something horrific to me, and then the next day you'd see them and they would be with their black best friend or whatever. You know, so that was always something that I struggled with. There were times earlier on in my career where I think it really got me down, because I was just hearing it a lot. You know, anytime you had any sort of issue with anybody, I was often the only person of colour within my team, even within the whole of the CSP. So that was the one thing they could pick on. And I very quickly realised that actually if I hadn't been there, they would have picked on somebody else and said something else. So it's definitely out there, and it is definitely a problem, and one that I have faced personally, and one that has been faced both by officers of colour, or perhaps who wear the hijab, but also by members of our community who face it daily. In terms of how we fix that, it just has to be a really robust dealing of that situation. So these people need to be arrested and dealt with, because if they get away with it over and over, then it will continue. And then it also has to be a lot of education around how that makes people feel when that happens, and how it makes them struggle with their own identities, feeling like they don't fit in, etc., etc. So I suppose my message is, that really think about the way, or not for us in here obviously, but for them to really think about how it affects people. Yeah, rambled on a bit there.
No, very good. Thank you so much. Just like that. How do we tackle mental health stigma in the Muslim community? She hasn't prepared, by the way, just so you know. So let's see how this comes up.
So we're talking about our community, Watford community.
Yeah.
So I think I'll be more specific. So we'll talk about the Pakistani community. So, I mean, mental health is a big no-no in the Pakistani community. You know, it's not spoken about. You can't be depressed. You can't have anxiety. And I think it all boils down to the lack of education, and also the previous generation. So, I mean, our parents or their parents who may have kind of migrated into this country many, many years ago, and I'm sure they all suffered with depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. But there's always a huge stigma associated with it, and it's not commonly spoken about. Now, so the other day, my mum was with her friends, and they were talking about this lady who lost her husband about a year ago, and in a Pakistani accent, they were saying she was depressed. So it is now coming out that it is a thing. People do go through it. So we're all hopeful that actually that stigma is slowly breaking down. What can we do about it is talking more about it. I think the other thing is within the community and within the NHS, there isn't a mental health setup which is culturally adapted, if that makes sense. So you might have a mental health professional which might not know your struggles because they're not from your background, or they may not understand your beliefs and ideas. So I think it's important to train mental health professionals, not just about the Pakistani community, but of all communities, having more community initiatives. We know, and getting the school involved. We know the school is very much involved with mental health and well-being, and sports centres like Watford Football Club, cricket clubs, badminton clubs. They are very well involved with mentorships and mental health. And then back down to the parents. So, educating the parents what is available, what signs to look out for in your teenagers with the youth. So, yeah.
Great, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Dave, question for you. We have touched upon it a little bit, but we can expand maybe. Does Watford Football Club have outreach programs that include faith-based considerations, where you have halal food and halal prayer spaces? What's your experience in that?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier about having the multi-faith and reflection room. So we've got one here at the stadium. We've also got one at our training ground as well.
Yeah.
So any events that we're going to be hosting at our training ground for communities, the space is available, the room is available. The way we've done with the multi-faith and reflection room, they're both decorated the same inside, so there's a consistency between the two venues. We've got additional spaces as well if we need them. So whenever we are working with any group, we would always ask what requirements are, what things are needed, dietary requirements needed, what time is we're going to break for prayers. To give you another example, we hosted a football tournament for another Muslim Youth Association last summer at the training ground, and again we used the training ground dome for prayer space and had the matches out on the pitches. So we're very, very flexible, and we're very, very understanding of the different requirements that people will come to us with. So that's again where our roles come into play, about understanding why those things are needed and making sure that we put provision in place. So our catering people will know to provide halal food options. When we did the family day here, we had lots of conversations with our catering partners about that. But yeah, we're very flexible, we're very open, and we want to be able to work with communities to be able to develop and deliver events the way that they want them to be developed. So, yeah, all of those considerations taken into account.
So just a shout out to the club. It's the only club in the entire country that's allowed a full-on fun day organised by the Muslim community on the actual pitch. So that's something Watford has achieved, and no other club has achieved that. So, you know, I'm proud of that. So that's really good.
Yeah, it was a good day, and I think that event in particular, what I loved the most about that event is it was open to everybody as well. It was the Muslim community putting it on, and the vast majority of people were from the Muslim community, but it wasn't just, it was people from all across the town that came to that event as well. And again, it's a number of things that I'm proud of personally that we've achieved over the last few years in our roles, because again, this club is a football club that's got community at its heart. We're sitting in the Elton John stand, we've got the Graham Taylor stand. Those two individuals, when they came to Watford in the late 70s and 1980s, a time when football hooliganism was rife and there were no fences around the ground because they trusted supporters to come and behave. Every other club in the country, there were fences to keep the fans in because they couldn't trust supporters to behave. So our ethos, our way of working, the family, we use this phrase, the original family club, and it's not just a twee marketing statement, it's a challenge to us. Are we upholding the traditions that were put in place for our football club 45, 50 years ago? Do we still live up to them as best we can in the modern world, which is challenging, it's difficult, it's not as easy as it was perhaps in the 70s and 80s to be able to do that, but we live by that ethos, and we try to make sure that we live to that and still are the original family community club, and putting on events, making sure that those events are as inclusive as they can be is central to that.
And just on that point, on that fun day that we had, there was an elderly Pakistani man who lives only a few roads away from the club, and he was very emotional. He came into the stadium and he's like, all my life I would never have imagined to come inside the club, because he was always fearful of not this club generally, but just football hooliganism. The whole culture wasn't friendly for a Muslim to be there. It was a bit risky, it was a bit dangerous. So he was extremely humbled by the idea that this has been organised. And I thought that was quite touching to me.
Yeah, and it speaks to my point from an earlier question about making the football club being part of the Muslim community and not the other way around. And yeah, you know, as I said earlier on, that's a central pillar of what we're trying to achieve, is making sure that the people that are in the Muslim community feel like the football club is for them as well, even if they don't want to come to football matches. And hosting iftar events, hosting the family fun days, to have that example is absolutely fantastic. And I had someone say that to me at one of the iftar events as well. Do you know what? I'm not really a football fan. I'd probably never set foot in the stadium without this event. To me, that's hugely powerful.
Nice. We'll do one round of final questions. We could go on another hour easily, but I think we should close it pretty.
My two.
I suppose the question I have for you, Chief Inspector, is what efforts are being made to recruit more diverse officers and ensure representation in the police force?
Yeah, great. Well, I'm probably going to give the mic very soon to Tomo there, because that's his day job, really. But I think what I'm personally doing, I suppose, is at Watford just making sure that certainly those Muslim officers that do join us, everything I can to reassure them they've made absolutely the right decision to join the constabulary, and that goes right down to the basics of when designing the new police station, which we've been in now for 2 years. It was very important to the constabulary right from the start that there was a prayer room, that there was a place where people of all faiths could go, but predominantly those who needed to pray at work had the right facilities to do so, and also I think a huge bonus to us at Watford in welcoming Muslim officers is our chaplain, Yasmin over there, who I'm pleased to say is the second Muslim chaplain we've had at Watford. We only have one police chaplain at Watford, and before Yasmin it was Brother Latif, who sadly we lost earlier in the year, last year of course now. And you know, let's be clear about this. I'm very aware that with Watford being the most diverse area of Hertfordshire, 60% of our population is white, 25% of Watford's population is Asian. The police service is nowhere near representative of that community, and that is something I really hope in my lifetime we will see the police force being as representative as its community. But I will now just pass on to Tomo, because he's doing some great work in trying to achieve that balance.
I also want to take some responsibility, because most of the Muslim parents were just like lawyers, doctors and engineers, so that's the other problem. You know, they won't really push it as a police force.
Thank you. So yeah, as Mr. Wiseman spoke about, that's part of my job. I suppose there's two things here. We have to not only make sure that we are trying to increase representation of people that look like me and everybody else in here, in the constabulary, but we need to make sure that we're treating them well once they're in, because there's no point bringing in Muslims, black, any other minority ethnic group if they're not being treated well. So it's a two-pronged approach. The first is that internal side of things. So what officers that we do have internally, making sure that they are being well supported, and that's what the team does. Making sure they're having coaching, mentoring. Again, we need to make sure that our officers from our minority backgrounds are being progressed throughout the organisation, etc. So you have various support staff networks, and that's a real big thing to make sure that we are continuing to do it. It's something that is happening, and there are hiccups along the way, but that is a priority, and that's my job to make sure that things that are going wrong are being challenged internally, and that we are being represented well internally. So then the other half of it is obviously the recruitment side of things. It's hard, like I've mentioned already, it's generational trauma, isn't it? You know, we can't get away from the fact that the police for a long time was not very good to our communities, and that generational trauma has been passed down. Things have changed in the majority of places, so it's making sure that we're educating our white colleagues, again, that real education piece as to why do black, Muslims, non-visibly ethnic minorities, whatever it is, why do they not want to join the police? So we need to educate them as to that. And then the final piece is making sure that we're attending events where we are, you know, directly speaking to our Muslim, you know, members of the community, or other minority ethnic members of the community. I firmly believe that you can't be what you can't see. So you need to see other people who look like us in the police to even contemplate being a police officer. And one of the things that made me smile, we were talking about this earlier, probably 6 months ago, in fact, no, when was it? Last Ramadan. We were coming back from a iftar event in London, and we popped into a petrol station, and there was a hijabi behind the counter serving, and Adana walked in, and she sort of looked at Adana, looked away, and then just sort of looked back in amazement and then smiled. So it's just making sure that we are getting people in, we're treating them well once they're in, we're mentoring them, we're coaching them, they're having good experiences, any bad experiences that might happen, making sure that we're addressing those, and that's all we can do. But if there is anyone who's ever thinking about becoming a police officer, the other thing that we can do is look at bringing you along for a day, for a ride along, so you can come out for the day, actually see what it's like, and you'll spend the day in the back of a police car, going out, finding out what it's like. But it's that tailored approach, yeah. So going to the events, finding the right sorts of people, and then helping them through the process. Not helping them through the process, making sure that they have the same chance as everybody else.
You know what? I forgot that I need to actually ask the audience a couple of questions. So before we wrap up, are there any questions from the audience to any of the panel members here that you want to ask? Feel free. And if you want to be controversial, you can do. It's fine.
Yeah, it was basically, we talked a lot about all the things that need to happen in terms of education, etc. But obviously, there are, historically, we know there are big flag that say bad apples.
Yep.
But obviously, there's a little bit more than that. But if you put that to one side, we have a situation where obviously within this, in the West, particularly in the UK, we have a lack of religious and cultural literacy. lack of knowledge about people's religion, or you want to put it like that. And so therefore, what are you actually doing about that? Because at the moment, I work in professional, I work in media, etc. And I actually was a crime producer for the BBC for many years. And one of my presenters ended up being Commander, I think, Sajid Javeed's brother, Baz Javeed. That's 25 years ago. So what I teach in Sky, BBC, Channel 4, I'm giving them, we're teaching the staff about Islamophobia, about Muslim communities, because that's the important thing as well. They're very different wherever you are in the country, etc. What are you guys doing? Because obviously the police force comes from society. Society has such poor religious literacy. What are you doing to address it? Because it's a surprise to me to find that a person may go in to visit a mosque for the first time when they come to Watford, but they may have been working in the police service for the last 10 years.
It's a really good point, and one that was asked recently. So it's going back a little bit. The two things that we have inside the organisation, Mr. Wiseman just reminded me, is an organisation called Hertfordshire Muslim Police Association. So that's run by somebody who's been in the organisation for a very long time, and he's campaigned tirelessly since the beginning, I think the last 17 years, for the rights of Muslims within the force. So he's the one who created things like the multi-faith rooms, making sure that Muslims looked after. And we also have the Black and Asian Police Association, Hearts Black and Asian Police Association, again, who represent the rights of our Black and Asian workforce. So to address your question directly, it's bad to think, isn't it, that an officer has never been inside a mosque before. And I was living proof of that. So I'm not going to bore you with details, but I grew up with a very negative view of Islam. From teachings, from hearing things, etc., etc. And it was only through education that I grew to love it and to learn the truth about it and to really delve into it. And that's really been a really powerful thing for me, because that education has completely changed my life around, and it's made me a completely different person, and it's what I was looking for my whole life. So what we've doing internally within the organisation is that every new police officer is going to be going on a cultural day. So as soon as they pass out of training, they are going to do a cultural awareness a couple of days. The first day is with a charity who we've identified, and what will happen is that they'll go into the masjid, okay, and they'll meet members of the Muslim community. They'll hear about what is important to them, and it sounds silly, but why is it that perhaps you need to take your shoes off before you go into a Muslim's house? Why is it that a female may not look you in the eyes, or vice versa? These little things that perhaps, I know that may not be understood and then cause issues. Not just Muslims, it's then going to be obviously Christians and Sikhs, temples, gurdwaras, all of that. So that's going to happen to every student that's coming through training school, and that's something that's being designed. And the first one is going to be on the 6th of March, I believe it is. The second day is going to be a day where the students will sit there and they will hear the stories from people who have gone through bad things, either at the hands of the police or through racism, hate crimes, Islamophobia, etc. So they'll be given a chance to understand why it is that we as a society are in the place that we are, and why police are not trusted. So that is a massive thing, that educational piece, and that's something that is going to happen. And I think we're going to be one of the first to do that. So we're really looking forward to that, the 6th of March. And again, if there are people that have experiences that want to speak at those, they'll be welcome to come and speak to these students.
Just because obviously that's meeting people and hearing about their experiences, which is not the same as understanding the dynamics of what people actually believe. The numbers of people, where they're from, what the differences might be between them, interrelate, etc. So it's very hard to. When's a lack of knowledge into a vacuum, you can think and put anything there. So I'm just saying it's actually fantastic what you're doing.
Yeah.
I completely get that. It's amazing. It's just that obviously look behind that. You do need to have a much more. No one should be serving a community if they have no idea who that community is.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree. So there's also things such as the anti-racism training that's been developed and as is actually being delivered to every single person within the forces receiving that anti-racism training. And I think it's been delivered to all the intervention officers. All the intervention officers and the S&T officers already, and the call handlers. But you're right, you're absolutely right. There needs to be more and more education. But that's what we need to keep delivering. We need to keep speaking to people like yourself, and if there's anything that you can suggest, then what I can say is that the constabulary would definitely listen to that, and would definitely put that forward.
One thing that the Watford Muslim Youth Centre likes to think is half decent at is educating people about Islam.
Yeah.
So if you need assistance with that,
100%, 100%. Yeah, that is definitely something that would be appreciated, and I think we could definitely get across the line.
You will also find that over the next few years, the workforce, the people going into this workforce, is going to be different because, so for example, in primary schools now, the children are all learning about Islam, Judaism. So they did Hanukkah recently, they did Diwali before, now they'll be doing Ramadan, then Christmas. So actually, the schools, I think education starts from a very low level, and I think when Chief Inspector here was talking about going out to primary schools, actually they are the sponges. You can't, it's hard to change beliefs and thinkings of, once you're older, 20 years plus, it's hard to, they're not very flexible. But if you catch them when they're young, at the primary school level, the kids are sponges. So I think now, if the schools are more involved, you'll find that actually this hopefully will be less of a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that is something that we could look at perhaps is, you've just mentioned that you'd love to teach people about Islam. There's things that we could do where we could open it up to any police officer and say, look, on this evening, let's see how many we can get down to just listen and to just be taught. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we don't have the perfect solution is the answer. So if you've got good solutions to it, I'd love.
I do it for a living.
Yeah.
Got the slides
So we can perhaps exchange details and actually find out what we can implement into it.
Are there any other questions from anyone else in the crowd? I know you wanted to ask something.
I think you've asked another question that I had.
Sorry,
Yes.
just to add to that, that was one of the things that I initially joined Hertfordshire as the Diversity, Equality and Inclusion Lead in Hertfordshire, and one of the things we identified was we are bringing in a lot of younger officers, and we don't know what their upbringing is, what their homeland was, what their religion is, if they had any religion or faith. And one of the things that we identified quite early on was that we didn't have just a basic level of guidance, so that when new officers come in, they can look at a certain faith and go, actually, I don't want to offend anyone, but I don't know. So some people on the island, perhaps they don't feel the confidence that they have the confidence to ask. So we did put a bit of we call a multi-faith guidance together that can be given to all new officers, which is focused on the 9 sort of main areas within Hertfordshire that we have around faith and religion. And what it does is it's very basic, but it does say to officers, you must take your shoes off. You might not be able to get a statement on a Saturday from a Jewish family. So it's very basic, but I think we didn't even have that to begin with.
No.
And we have created that, and that is available for all officers on our Diversity, Equality and Inclusion SharePoint page. So we do advertise that, the training school are aware of it, and it is something that we do now have that we didn't have before.
Thank you so much. Well, any final comments from anyone?
Just while we're on that subject, if I could share, just share some examples of how football's dealing with that same challenge. And I think football as an industry has gone through a big change in the last 10 years, really, and equality, diversity, inclusion has become very central to clubs, it's become central to the leagues. And I think the way that we try to educate and make our staff aware is also a really key part of this work, because football, I mentioned it before, football has got an ability and a power, and it's held to a higher standard than other sports, other businesses, other industries, in terms of what it can achieve and what its voice can do. And I think some of the stuff that we've done in the last few years where we've educated, we take, similar to what Saika was saying about schools, our academy players all go through an education process now. So first team players, it's harder to do anything with because they live in this little bubble where they're so focused on results on Saturday. But academy players now at clubs up and down the country are educated about Islamophobia. They're educated about the the Muslim faith, they will be educated about the Jewish faith, they'll be educated about the Hindu faith, and those sessions and that work that's being done across football is having that same benefit, it's having that same effect, making sure that if anybody knows this stat, but academy players that are in academies and professional clubs, less than 1% will get to play professional match for the team or for the team that represents the academy that they come through. So the academy system now in football is so geared towards making sure that the individuals that leave football at 19, 20 without a professional career, that they're going to go back into the workforce and to the world, that they have that education, that they understand about different religions, that they've had that they talk to them about finances and other things as well. We try very hard, and I think every industry, every business, it's incumbent on everybody to play their role in making sure that more people, that literacy that you talk about, improves. It's not just on the police force, it's on everybody, and it's on every industry to try to improve those sorts of things. But again, just those examples in football, it's so common now in football.
It's actually one of the best, some of the most religiously literate people are working in football than there are in, seriously, because for the last decade or so, they've had people from Muslim faiths playing in their teams. So therefore, as you know, they've worked in that area. So when basically they actually have huge knowledge about Muslims simply because they're hanging out with them every day.
Yeah, I know our football club is a perfect example of that. The starting point for our relationship working with the Watford Muslim Youth Centre Trust was two of our Muslim players 5 years ago during Ramadan wanting to find somewhere they could donate food to during Ramadan. And so my predecessor in the role, reaching out to the Muslim community, where can our players come? What can they do? We don't understand what it is exactly that they want to do. Can you help us with that? That's where this relationship was born from. And again, where we're at now with our Muslim players, our nutritionists, our analysts, they all know Ramadan's coming at the end of February, and they all know, they're all geared up and ready to support our Muslim players. Not every player will fast for the entirety of Ramadan. Not every player, some players will choose not to fast on match days, but we know all of our Muslim players, and we know what their preference is going to be during the month. So again, that knowledge across the game is hugely developing. Sorry, I've ran football on top, but it's great, and it's so interesting to see so many of these different things that are happening across the game. There are organisations now that are looking after the spiritual side of things for players as well, such as Nujum Sports, who I know I've mentioned before that we work with, where they are spending time with players, nurturing that spiritual side of their lives as well. So much of it happening in football.
I think
Yeah.
I mean, this evening was about bringing people together from different organisations, from the community yourselves, but from the police force, from the club, from a community organisation like Watford Muslim Youth Centre, just to try to highlight that that's what's needed to improve our society. It's multifaceted, and everyone has to get involved, from the sisters to the brothers, from the old to the young. And I think we are here to make a change. And so I just want to say thank you for your attendance and for your time. Time is precious for everyone, and especially for the people who visited as well. It is precious, so thank you for your time. And I wish and pray that we go forwards in the most positive way for the betterment of this town and this country. So thank you so much. And one final thing, there are teas, snacks, drinks, etc. all over there. Please help finish them, otherwise I'll be putting on extra calories today. So thank you so much. Thank you.